Well, alright. Coming to you from down under. Definitely some interesting times. The state I'm in has just announced that from mid-December, you can't go anywhere, and most people have to lose their jobs if you haven't had the medication. So, yeah, a lot of people are pretty fucked, to be honest. But one good thing that can come out of this is that amidst all this Armageddon of free choice and independent thought, at least we can take away the silver lining, that is, we can conclusively win a lifelong internet argument, which is the value of libertarianism. I would like to bring to you this public service announcement. Libertarianism is dead. It is empirically over. It's gone. Don't waste our time with libertarianism ever again. I'll tell you why. So, when I was a libertarian, and you know, really the best way to think about it is it's like a religion. It's a set of, you know, religious-like beliefs about humanity that aren't tied to empirical, observable human behavior. And I was convinced that because I, as a person, the type of person I am, disagreeable, hardworking, fairly successful at what I choose to do, and so paying tax and dragging people along behind me is somewhat of a net negative. But the problem with that is, to what degree are you projecting onto everyone else? Are you projecting your strengths and weaknesses and your temperament and your capabilities onto other people? And the world isn't made up of people just like you, so it's not a good idea to project yourself onto the world and think that everyone is or should be like you. And so, when in my libertarian days, I used to think that the government was oppressing us. The government's oppressing me, and it's oppressing all of us, and if we'd only just wake up to the truth, we'd overthrow our oppressors, and we could all be free, libertarian, ANCAP. You know, get off my lawn, I don't care if you've got a drug den next door, people. And you know what, look, the value in it is, it's really an ideology for ascendant young men. It's all about the market. You know, the underlying vibe of libertarianism is really, you know, compete with excellence in the market for production of goods and services, and make money and raise your status. And it's great. It's great. As a young man, it's great, because what it did for me was made me deprogram from being more of a lefty, and it made me stop hating the market and realize that money is a representation of how we trade value, and if you're not getting any money from people, it means you're not providing them any value. And so get out there, provide value to people. It's moral, it's great, get amongst it, make some money, and establish your status as a young man. That's all really good stuff. It's all really good stuff. But you know, it reminded me of something that Noah Ravoy said. You know, you go through levels of maturity, you go through levels of responsibility, and as a child, you know, you try and be responsible for yourself, okay? Then as a young man, you want to establish yourself so that you can be responsible for yourself and a family. And I think that's really where libertarianism comes in. It's like, you're a young man, you're trying to establish your financials and your status so that you can be responsible for a wife and kids, and that's great. That's really great stuff. But when you get too far down the line of, let's say, when you start looking at things at a larger scale, somebody has to take responsibility for the polity, the society, the larger thing. And that's really where conservatism comes into play, because, you know, conservative established males, a lot of the conservative intuitions are taking care to preserve the capital of the larger society, all the forms of capital of the larger society. And so libertarianism it is immature in a little sense, in that it shirks responsibility for society. And you know what? You can argue with me. I know every libertarian argument back to front. I know what I'm talking about. I was very into it. I know how to debate it. But I'm telling you now, empirically looking at the behavior of libertarian people, and the presumptions in their arguments, there is a fair degree of I don't care about things like social norms or group cohesion, all these things, which as you go up in scale as you go larger in scale, they become very important. And so once again, libertarian young men competing in the market for wealth and status, that ideally morphs into conservative, established males, long-term capital of the whole polity or whole society, that kind of thing. But anyway, got off on a little bit of a tangent there. But as I was saying, the recent calamities with which my society is being enamored, that's a really convoluted sentence. The drama that we're going through has definitely pointed out to me the degree to which people don't want to take responsibility for their society because it's just too big, too complicated, I don't know, beyond my abilities, beyond my interest. And to this end, it always struck me when I first started reading Kurt's work that he would said people generate demand for the state. And I was like, what do you mean? But once again, he's applying economic language to all of human behavior, in that if they're economic demand, they create economic demand for the state. And I have experienced that firsthand so viscerally lately. You actually can see it everywhere you look, and I think I really understand this on a very deep level now. People want politicians. People want to offload responsibility for their lives to a degree. Once again, it's all about scale. Do they want to offload the responsibility of what job they have and who they marry? No, they don't. But do they want to offload the responsibility of things that are beyond their interest or capability to really deeply understand? Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, libertarianism is at its heart a leftist doctrine because its basic assumption is that of equality. Libertarians will just compete in the market, Well, you're not taking into account that not everyone has the same capacity to compete in the market, and that when people are left behind, their intuitions demand that they find a solution that stops them being left behind, or at least mitigates the degree to which they are. And so human beings, empirically, human beings, we're a hierarchical species. Not everyone has the same capacities. Not everyone has the same capacity to take responsibility. Not everyone has the same capacity to take responsibility for the same scope of things. Some people can take responsibility for very large things, very long time frames, and larger aspects of society. Some people can barely take responsibility for their own lives. Some people in the middle, and they might be able to manage a small business and a family. We are a hierarchical species, and where people's ability and interest in taking responsibility falls short, they create a market demand for a politician to come and claim that he'll fix their problems. You can see this everywhere. Libertarianism is over because people want the state. People want it. And I'm a very disagreeable person, which means, I'm friendly. I really value manners a lot and being polite. I definitely want to be, and I value honesty and politeness, but disagreeable means I don't need, in my heart of hearts, I don't require the agreement of the group quite so much. And I'm happy to hold my opinion separate to other people. What other people think is isn't as large a factor in my decision making as it would be for other people. You know, so for me, being a more disagreeable person, libertarianism's great. but other people, you know, they want to fit in more. They are more agreeable, you know. So, and you find this with a lot of libertarian people, personalities, you know, they are more agreeable. They're a bit more like lone wolves as well. You know, that's definitely with the lifelong libertarians. You get the young guys who are, like I said, they're just trying to establish their status, and that's great. But then the lifelong die-hard libertarians, they're the type who, you know, kind of like black-pilled style. No, I'm just going to go out and live in a wood somewhere, you know, or in the desert, or they're more lone wolves, you know. Not that Devon Stack is a libertarian anymore, he's grown past it and that's fine, but he definitely has those same sentiments, as do a lot of us in these circles, you know. Disagreeable, successful, leave me alone, I just want to produce and make money kind of people. But that's not how most people are. They're not like this. They emotionally and intuitively demand group cohesion. They demand that other people take responsibility for their problems, because it's easier for them. You know, if taking responsibility for society is beyond your ability, then the only thing you can do is add to the market demand for someone else to do it. You know, this is the way human beings are. So, you know, libertarianism, empirically, it's over. It's done. It's a done deal. Move on. Because empirically, whilst there are pockets of people who have different requirements for different states, all these sort of things, but en masse, in general, people create demand for politicians. They want politicians to fix their problems, and that's about it. So, as Kurt said, people create demand for the state. But they have different demands for different types of states, and so that's another conversation. But the vast majority of people, and you know, I've been going through a few things lately trying to mobilize a group of people in real life, you know, with some success, but also with some failures, like, you know, depending on the people, it's with varying degrees of success, I'll say, but you know, it's actually gone pretty well. But what I can tell you is people freak out and then they look to someone else to fix their problem, and you know, it's hard enough to even get them to rally behind someone else who's willing to take the hits, or to say what they won't say, or to do things that they won't do. It's hard enough to get them to support someone else who's willing to stick their neck out. And I think it's absolutely blatantly obvious that should those people have to completely take responsibility for themselves and stick their neck out themselves, there's just very few people prepared to do that. And so Kurt was right. Once again, people generate demand for the state. Another interesting thing, really fascinating comment, was the degree. He was talking about the degree to which there is supernaturalism and fictionalism and woo-woo in different religions, and that this is tied to the demand for mindfulness. And people's demand for mindfulness is a result of the conditions they're in, and how extreme those conditions are. You know, what level of existential anxiety and threat are they living with? And the more anxiety you have over your current situation, the more you're emotionally creating a demand for supernaturalism. You know, and that's the thing I've seen as well. Just to tie off that point, I think he said there is a hierarchy of supernaturalism, with the lowest being Buddhism and Shintoism, because these, you know, Japan's a very civilized country and very low conflict. And so because the people there live with low conflict, have obviously got, you know, low levels of anxiety, and so they have a low demand for additional mindfulness, and so they have a low demand for supernaturalism in their rituals and in their religion. And then I think he said, you know, Hinduism is at somewhere in the middle. But then at the most extreme end, you have Judaism and Islam with the most supernaturalism and fictionalism. Once again, because they live in the most conflict, the most tribal conflict, which creates the largest demand for generating mindfulness. And once again, their need for mindfulness is what incentivizes them to entertain larger levels or demand larger levels of woo-woo and fictionalism and fantastical stories. And so once again, these two things actually are kind of linked in that you're both talking about whether it's the degree of supernaturalism in someone's belief system or the degree to which they offload responsibility for their life to a politician. You're both talking about what people's intuitions generate demand for. So once again, you know, the lefties, they're always talking about religion and things like that. Religion and the state, and in the libertarians too, they say the two, you know, religion and the state, religion and the state. At the end of the day, the point is people want these things. They generate demand for them as well. And look, I think Martin pulled me up on this and he said, you know, there is top-down programming of the NPCs as well. I get that. So these things could be done in other ways if you had a power structure interested in doing that. But at the same time, you can manipulate and push and prod people certain ways, this way and that way, but I think at the end of the day, the hardwired intuitions, I don't think they're completely programmable. As Kurt said, you know, we are bots. You know, we have inbuilt programs as well. And so, yeah, does the top program the NPCs, or do the demands of the NPCs generate the type of elites that they get? I think, like a lot of things, it's probably going to be a mutually reinforcing feedback between the two poles, you know what I mean? It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. But regardless, where we are at the moment, the way it seems at the moment is, forget libertarianism. People want the state because, or as Kurt said, most people want to be serfs. And that doesn't mean a slave or oppressed, but what it means is they want to have choice in the small things, but then they want to have safety, and the big stuff, they just want to know someone else is taking care of it. You know, they want to live, they don't want to have to think up, or they can't even think up their own systems of rule of law, for instance. You know, they don't want to take responsibility for the law, they just want it to be good and work so that they can get about worrying about who to date and going to the gym and what car to buy. That's what I mean. People want to have control over their consumption and their dating and things like that, you know. But when it gets to the really big stuff that the politicians should be in charge of, they don't want responsibility for that stuff. They want to outsource responsibility for those things. So people create demand for the state. Now the problem is too, once again, as we all know, we're in a democracy, so we're at the beck and call of the demands of people who don't really have a concept of the things that they're doing at large scales, you know what I mean? People's understanding is limited. It just is. And so that's where you get the whole, you know, tragedy of democracy, in that a politician with the right intentions who wants to parent, who wants to take responsibility at large scale, can easily be outvoted by a politician who just lies and tells everyone what they want to hear, because the people, you know, casting the votes to vote them in don't take responsibility. That's the whole point, you know. And I know that it's not that cut and dry, it's not a direct democracy. You know, there's definitely, the power structure can get in and veto things as much as they like as well. So once again, it's more complicated than that. But the point I want to make is libertarianism. They say free yourself of the state and religion and just, you know, be free like us, whatever. The whole premise is that the state and religion are oppressing people, but they're not. They're not necessarily. Once again, I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. and people do get oppressed by the state and religion to a degree. Yes, I agree with that. But also, the intuitions, the emotional demand for mindfulness and not taking responsibility generate these things. So the demand for mindfulness and outsourcing of responsibility from the people generate belief systems and governmental systems as well. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, but it's just not true that the people would be free if we just got rid of the government. No, they would still rally behind anyone who put their hand up and said, support me with some minimal token of time or money, whatever, and I will campaign to fix your problems. So once again, people generate demand for the state. They just do. That's empirically, I've just learnt that. I accept that, that's fine, but I viscerally have learnt that the degree to which most people, when it comes to big things that they don't understand or don't want to understand, they just want to complain, and complaining is hoping someone else fixes it. And also too, with these tough times, with these very, very troublesome issues that I'm living through at the moment, it's like emotionally it's really full on. It's been up and down. My business and my life has effectively been bullied by my government for almost 2 years now, 18 months. And it's really trying. And I've seen with other people too, once again, they have this anxiety, they're facing a situation they don't have control over, they feel out of control, and this generates a huge demand for mindfulness. And I have seen, once again, it's going to come down to what sort of personality you are, but I have seen people retreat into supernaturalism and to fantasy and conspiracy theories, and this is all just trying to have mindfulness. It's trying to reduce that anxiety they feel about a situation that they don't have control over. Two sides of the same coin. But yeah, public service announcement, forget libertarianism. It's as bad as communism in that it doesn't address the type of human you're dealing with. It addresses maybe a very small and odd fraction of the population. So it's over, done. Stick a fork in it.